Hey everyone, you're about to watch a video of a workshop I led called Preparing for Your Annual Review. What you'll see is some awesome content and tips and tricks on making the most of the annual review process. What you won't see is the half an hour of conversation and discussion we had afterwards with community members around their specific experiences and making sure that they're taking advantage of their review process to really move their careers forward. That's what we do at Silicon Society. We make sure that the members of our community can really get ahead in their careers and feel fully supported through workshops and also through shadows of our engineers working on real agency projects. So enjoy the video. And if you're interested in more, join the community and be able to join those conversations. Thanks so much. Okay, perfect. Thank you both for coming to the prep your for your annual review workshop. I know November is sort of like early mid-cycle for a lot of folks, but I know I've been hearing a few questions about it, so I figured I'd just put together some content for Silicon Society members around really getting ready for your annual review. Like I said before, it's an area that I get very passionate about because I think there's, in some ways, for lack of a better word, like a way to sort of game it or just have some strategies to really make sure you're documenting the right things to your benefit. Hopefully your annual review is not like this cartoon on the bottom, which is a text message. And it is a more robust process that you can really kind of engage in and use for your career development. So things I'm going to cover today are strategies around timing and how to engage at different times of the review process, peer reviewers, and specifically how to strategically select peer reviewers, self ratings and strategies around that, how to approach the written content, which could be self reviews, peer reviews, etc. Discussion and edits as an important part of the process, as well as follow up afterwards. So just to like level set, I'm going to spend 1 minute on this slide since I believe everyone here has been through this process before. But an overview of what a regular performance review process has looked like, in case and for anyone this is their first, is the process will launch usually through an email or an all hands meeting. Usually they'll use like a third-party software platform to manage the process. But you'll give a heads up about that and the timeline for your specific company. Some companies do it once a year, some companies do it twice a year. Companies that do it twice a year will sometimes have compensation tied to just the end of the year review process. So there are some variations based on companies, but it'll launch in an email or an all hands. You'll usually be asked to loop in some peers to review your work and for you to review their work. So you'll nominate them and your manager will approve those peer reviews. You will then write a self-review as well as a manager. You also usually review your manager. Your manager will also review you. So these are usually like you have a few weeks to do each of these. And then you will meet with your manager. You'll discuss all the feedback. Potentially based on the cycle, you'll discuss promotion or raise implications. And then there'll be final documentation. Usually you have to like approve whatever was written by your manager as like your final review for that season. Anything here that I glaringly missed, feel free to unmute or drop it in the chat.
It might not fit neatly into this, but I've had to do skip level reviews before, and it feels like it needs a very diplomatic touch.
Yes. Yes. So as in addition to your manager review, you also reviewed their manager?
No, I did a one-on-one with my manager's manager, discussing my manager.
Ooh, okay. Oh, okay. Giving direct feedback about your manager. Oh, yeah, that's not typical, but I love a company with good communication. So, so that's cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Anything else that I may have missed here? Okay, so that is an overview of what kind of the review process looks like. I want to talk a little bit about timing that actually takes us back to before this process starts. And so one thing that's really important to do a few months before a review process. So if your review process is beginning of 2025, so January, February, now is a great time to do this. If it's December, it might be a little late for this, but basically you want to very explicitly ask if you're on track for whatever raise or promotion you might be going for. If you got one mid-year, this might not be an appropriate conversation. This is going to be very specific, but I put a little bit of a flow chart here to very explicitly show that what I want you to ask is, am I on track for a raise or promotion? So you're not asking for the raise, but you're letting them know, I expect this during my annual review process. Am I on track? If they say yes, I want you to document the conversation. So if you're having that conversation live, then I want you to send them a Slack message or an email saying, thanks so much for the conversation. I'm so glad that I'm on track for that raise or promotion we spoke about. I look forward to hearing more about it during the end of the year review cycle. But the more powerful thing is if they say no, then you're able to have a conversation. What would you want to see in the next few weeks or the next few months so that I could get that raise and promotion? So you're asking for actionable steps to allow yourself to advocate for that later in the year, and then you can kind of course correct. So this is a really good strategy. A lot of people just ask for the raise and don't ask for it a few months before, but allows you to kind of set the right steps in motion. And just like if they say yes, you want to document. And then if they did give you specific steps towards that next, raise or promotion, make sure that you're following up with them, either hopefully in weekly one-on-ones or whatever regular cadence of check-in. So that's kind of even before the start of this flowchart. You want to be checking in on your eligibility for that and how you can be making progress towards that salary or role increase. Now, this might sound a little like basic, but I do think it is very powerful to work on your review early and submit it before the deadlines. So there are some parts of this process that are setting yourself up for the highest chances of success, whatever that means for you in this review process, and submitting on time is one of those. Now, to be fair, I do want to caveat, I am someone, and I've always been someone who submits by the deadline, and then give me a thumbs up in the chat if your company has extended the deadline for people to submit their self-reviews, because I know pretty much every cycle I've ever been a part in, people have been given extra days. Yeah, okay, seeing at least one thumbs up. And inside, I might get a little bit annoyed about that. Like, I got it done on time. Why can't everyone else? But then, of course, there were times where I missed it. But all that to say, there's two main reasons why I'm going to tell you to get it done on time. And it's not just because of deadlines. One is you want to ensure that whenever leadership has their meeting to discuss ratings and promotions, your review is in. You want your words in that meeting. They do pull those up, most likely. And so it's great to have that done. You don't want to miss the deadline, but the team is already meeting. That's one. Two, you want to help out your peer reviewees, the people you're reviewing. You want to help them out by having your done. And we're going to talk in a second around how to select the people that you're peer reviewing, that are peer reviewing you. But if everyone's doing it strategically, you are finding the people who you would like to be part of your work, cross-functional work or team in the coming year. And so you just want to build a good relationship with them. And so by getting those done on time, even sometimes doing those before your self-review, you've got yourself some good people in your corner. So that's a bit about timing and some tips and tricks there. Now let's talk a little bit about peer reviewers. So there's three main categories of folks that I would recommend that you think about. I saw your responses before this workshop that it seems like anywhere from 3 to 5 peer reviews are what's being recommended by the teams of the folks here. And so one is you want a softball peer review. So you want a teammate, it could be a work friend, someone who just knows your work, thinks the world of you, and will just, you will have one glowing peer review. Okay, that's your softball one. Then I want you to focus on getting at least one, preferably 2 cross-functional partners. So people not on your direct team that you have supported, maybe an internal client, maybe a stakeholder to your work. That is very, very powerful when you're looking to grow in your career to get those cross-functional perspectives. And then the last one is at least one person not in your direct reporting line, but who is more senior than you at the company. So what I mean by that is if you're on, I don't know, a front-end development team, maybe you get a product manager as one of your cross-functional partners, but maybe you can get someone more senior in that org as a peer reviewer, as well as a way to show kind of the broader scope of the impact that your work is having. Other questions that'll help you identify your most strategic peer reviewers are things like what cross-functional partners will be excited about continuing to work with you, or who, another way to think of that is who do you want to continue working with? What leaders would be excited to invest in you? And which colleagues see your work impact daily and can just very easily speak to that. Any questions on peer reviewers or selecting those?
In my company, we just kind of get assigned. It's basically everybody on my team. We review each other. Just engineering.
Mhm.
Not much leeway. I don't know if that's normal. This sounds cooler if I got to pick.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So I've usually seen the ability to pick, but I would actually recommend, even if you're auto assigned, all the more reason to go above and beyond and ask a cross-functional partner to send you a review, either within the review system. You can even say to your manager, like, I'd love for Sarah on product management, obviously I'm making this up, to write me a review. Could you add her to my list? Or just have her or whoever it is email you a review and forward that to your manager, because it'll then give you an edge on the rest of your team.
Yeah,
That's super interesting.
yeah, that's a good idea.
Cool.
That is interesting. For us, we're the ones picking to review anonymously. And we don't get people don't generally, I think, ask others to do it. It's more that you have to do, I think, 5. But then also there's no limit. Like you could review anybody at the company. And admittedly, I'm at a startup, so it's pretty small. But yeah, I hadn't actually considered the idea of straight up asking, just because it seemed like the goal was to be anonymous. But I suppose
Yeah.
you can always pad the numbers if you wanted to.
Right. And I'm going to talk later on around kind of documenting stuff all year long, so that when it comes to write your annual review, you have lots of good stuff to include. So this is a way to also kind of catch up on that. Like, let's say you haven't gotten written praise from someone all year, because not all companies have a culture of that. It's a way to just kind of include that. So even if you can't formally do it in the system, because it's an anonymized system, you could still say like, hey, can you send me some quotes? I'd love to include a bit about our cross-functional partnership in my self-review. Then they can email that to you and you can include that in your self-review. So lots of ways to include that feedback and show like, hey, people want me around, and also look at this impact I'm having outside of the scope of my day-to-day role.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Okay, so next I want to cover self-ratings. And I'm not going to lie, this is probably my hottest take, and also the one that I'm most passionate about. So I'm happy to discuss it. But in most tools that are used by companies, there's a self-rating system, like 1 to 5 usually. And you're asked to rate yourself on the past year, maybe according to certain goals, how you did. And the strategy here is rank yourself high. That's it. That's the advice. No matter what, just give yourself a high ranking. You don't have to give yourself the highest ranking for everyone. Like, you don't have to give yourself 5s down the line. You can say like, okay, maybe this one, I exceeded expectations on everything, but this one I met expectations or went beyond expectations. Maybe give yourself a 4 for one of them. But your manager is never going to rank you higher than you rank yourself. So rank yourself high. Any questions on that?
Seems pretty straightforward.
Great. I can't tell you how many reviews I've seen where people are giving themselves like 2 and 3s on areas where they do have room for growth. But if you showed up every day and you were working with your manager on that, you give yourself that 4 or 5, and then in your feedback, talk about how you're addressing that growth. But as long as you have addressed it, 4 or 5s. I know I'm posting this video, so it's a hot take I'm putting out there, but I do believe it to be the right strategy in the process as it is today at most companies. Okay. So let's talk about the written content. This is obviously the parts that's going to take the most time. There's a lot of peer reviews. We'll talk a little bit about the content there here, but certainly for your self review, there's 4 main things that I want to touch on. When it comes to format, I always recommend bullet points. Kind of like just very easy to read, easy to digest for whoever's reading it. No long written paragraphs. No need to really use like ChatGPT or any like LLM to write these, because they're going to be very specific and actionable. have it start with a short 1 to 2 sentence kind of like thesis about what you're going to cover, and then just bullet point your accomplishments under whether it's like what you've done, whether maybe it's a specific goal, areas you succeeded, areas for growth, 1 sentence, and then bullet points. I'd recommend you use this same format for peer and manager reviews as well. Make it really easy for folks to also synthesize these into like a manager review. So short paragraph, short thesis, bullet points. You want to make sure to include examples. So for each question, include at least 1 anecdote. And this is where my pro tip is, if this is not something you already do, maybe it is, but if it's not, start an email folder where throughout the year, you put anytime someone emails like, great job, I'm so glad we had you on this project. Or maybe you put together like a really large deck presenting like something that you built. Or maybe it was like an awesome documentation on a new code base that you put together from start to finish. Just save a version of that, or even just send yourself an email about what the project is and save it in an email folder. Now you have a folder at the end of the year where you can go through and just see your accomplishments and see the praise that you got really easily. It's also really great, like on a bad day. If you're like having a hard day, you're like, why am I here? You can go and see, oh, right, here's great stuff I've done and people who appreciate me. So you want to make sure you're including at least 1 anecdote for every answer in the questionnaire. You want to quantify as much as possible. So as much data as you can. If you can talk about either quantity of whatever it is that you contributed, if it's meetings that you had as a goal, if it's lines of code, if it's client retention, whatever it is, any measurable increases or decreases, again, based on your goal, just call those out and try to put them in percentages and quantify that. So that plus an example is a very, very good holistic view of what you've contributed to a company. And then think about actionable goals. There's always a forward-looking part of the review for yourself. What are you looking to accomplish in the next year? What are you looking to grow? I want you to think of this as when you're in an interview and people ask you, like, what's your biggest weakness, right? So you don't want to ever in a annual review be like, I have not been on time to any meetings in 2024, so I would like to be on time in 2025, right? You don't want to pull out something that will be super negative. Instead, what you want to do is choose something actionable that you and hopefully you and your manager are already working on and just expound on that. When you think about goals for next year, look ahead and think of cross-functional partners and very specifically like hard skills that will help you get to the next job that you want or get you the salary increase that you want. Anytime you can quantify goals is great, but I always recommend when you're looking forward to give ranges. So you don't want to ever set a goal that you're going to miss. And so give a range. And then at least you'll fall somewhere in that range. Any question on the written content? All right. So let's talk about discussion and edits. So after you have the written content, you'll have that live meeting with your manager. And so I want to give some kind of do's and don'ts on how to approach those conversations. Things that you should do. Show up on time. A lot of times these like really important developmental meetings are like shoved between 2 other meetings. That's real life. Your manager might be a couple minutes late. Prioritize this meeting, show up on time, show that it's important to you. Even if it's a process that's been delayed and you're supposed to have it in January and now it's March and you're kind of annoyed, show up on time, put your best foot forward. Follow your manager's lead on the conversation flow. And there might be folks in here that are managers as well and might have their own strategies on how they lead these meetings. I know I have a way that I lead these meetings, but everyone will be different. Some will let you read through the review that they wrote live, take a minute of kind of silence to read through that and then discuss it. Some will go through it section by section with you. Some will just be thinking about sharing it with you when they enter that meeting. Have patience, smile, whatever it is, but let them take the lead on the conversation flow. It is okay to show emotion, whether it's happy or frustrated during a performance review. You don't need to be fake. You don't need to be silent. But what you want to show emotion towards is the situation, whatever that means, versus your manager specifically. Your goal is to get them to advocate for you and keep them on your side. Hopefully you have a good relationship, but that's not always the case. And so, for example, and we'll talk about this a bit more, but when it comes to ratings, A lot of companies give very few overall, like 5 and 4 ratings. And most employees get a 3, which is like meeting expectations, and then a small percentage will get a 2 or a 1. That's very frustrating if you're a high-performing employee and you get a 3, because that's what most people get. Be frustrated at the system and the process. That's normal, but do not get frustrated at or angry at the manager. That might be obvious, but it's like it's one of the hardest things. And it is absolutely okay to ask for time after the meeting to read over the review again before it is formally submitted. Some managers will be good about this. They'll even say it, take some time, read this over, let me know if you want anything added or changed. And some greener managers might just say, okay, can I click submit after this conversation? Slow them down, ask time to review. Honestly, whether the conversation went great or not so great, because either way, you can suggest things to be added to it, because this does go on your employee record. So you should be mindful of that and not have to react in the moment. And lastly, if you did bring up a salary conversation, hopefully they proactively address that. But if they don't, feel free to proactively bring it up. Will that be happening here? Will there be a further discussion? If they tell you there is no salary increase, or like, let's say just a cost of living, which you were expecting more than that, ask for reasons and ask for next steps. And of course, just take notes and document, because that can potentially be a larger conversation. Okay, real quickly, some don'ts. Don't surprise your manager with new content or topics in the meeting. So ideally, when you show up to a performance review, none of the information is new. You know how you're performing already. Your manager checks in with you regularly. That's not always the case. Sometimes they're surprising you with new content. That can be frustrating, but you don't want to surprise them or put them on the spot. So you should expect that whatever you put in your self-review and what has been submitted by your peers, that will be kind of what the conversation is based off of, and don't come in with some big new topic. Don't get angry at your manager or act unprofessionally. Probably obvious, not always so easy. Don't over rotate on your numerical rating. So I know I just gave the example of like a lot of companies who kind of clump most employees in a 3, and that can be very frustrating. Really focus more on the anecdotal pieces and where you can kind of add more information in there, because that is, if you're looking to move into another role and they look at your performance review, they're going to get much more from that written content than just the number. Don't end the meeting without next steps. So again, those next steps should probably be, let me review it again, or if there are additional conversations around promotion or salary, it should be scheduling a time for that additional conversation. And remember, it is your job to make sure there is follow-up after the conversation. So proactively suggest edits and or email about a raise request, and then schedule that follow-up meeting. Some managers will do this intuitively, but this extra step, being really proactive, is sometimes outside the scope of the process. Those are not normal follow-up meetings, but you are going to ask for one if you have something to talk about, or if you want to follow up on a raise discussion. And so be proactive and be the one to schedule that meeting if you want it to happen. Okay, that was a content-heavy slide. Any questions on that? Okay. Those were all the main topics that I wanted to cover in terms of like tips or tricks and how to approach it. We're going to go into a bit of a whiteboarding brainstorm. I'm going to stop the recording for that.